Well, good afternoon. I'm John Levy. It's my privilege to serve as the 10th chair of the Board of Directors of the Legal Services Corporation, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to this significant briefing on how the nation's civil legal aid providers help veterans overcome the various legal challenges many face after their years of service to our country. I want to particularly thank our country's distinguished Republican Senator Roy Blunt of Missouri, his Democratic counterpart from Washington State, Senator Patty Murray, for co-sponsoring this event. I also want to thank the wonderful members of our panel. Will Gunn, the former General Counsel of the United States Department of Veteran Affairs and himself a retired Air Force colonel. Susan Lutton, the Executive Director of LSC's grantee, Mid-Missouri Legal Services Corporation, based in Columbia, Missouri. Ronnie Pitcock, an Army veteran and a client of another LSC grantee, Legal Aid of Western Missouri, based in Kansas City. And Maura Checkett-Weber, an attorney at Legal Aid of Western Missouri. We're privileged to have all of them join us today. The nearly 22 million Americans who have served in our armed forces have not only protected our freedoms and kept us safe, but through their service, they have helped defend our way of life and the abiding values of our founding fathers. One of those bedrock values is equal access to justice, and ensuring that our nation's veterans and military families enjoy this access is one of the most important aspects of LSC's mission. Local legal aid offices funded by LSC are gateways for those veterans who are in need of civil legal assistance. Many veterans who served abroad return home to confront legal problems, foreclosures, evictions, consumer fraud, child custody issues, wrongful denial of benefits. And LSC and its grantees across the country support veterans in a number of ways, including launching stateside-legal.org, the first national website focusing on helping veterans and military families, establishing medical legal partnerships with veterans' health centers, operating legal hotlines for veterans, taking part in stand-down events for homeless veterans, receiving regular referrals from Veterans Group, and joining with the ABA and law firms across the country in the Veterans Consortium Pro Bono program to provide assistance to unrepresented veterans and their families who have filed appeals at the United States Court of Appeals for veterans' claims. In 2015 alone, LSC grantees assisted nearly 110,000 veterans and their families. But these efforts have been hampered by the continuing funding crisis in civil legal aid. In 2015, more than 61 million Americans qualified for civil legal aid during the entire year, and another 30 million qualified because they lived for 2 months or more at or below 125% of the federal poverty guideline, nearly 1/3 of our population. And a recent American Bar Foundation study found that 80% of low-income Americans do not even recognize when they have a civil legal need. A Washington State Supreme Court report released just last year found that 70% of low-income households in Washington faced a significant civil legal issue in the past 12 months, but 3/4 of them did not seek or could not obtain such assistance. Yet, given these alarming facts, LSC funding has, for many years, been just a rounding error in our federal budget? Does anyone think the values that LSC, that we are charged with upholding, are a mere fiscal afterthought? Clearly, we need additional resources if we are to expand access to justice to our nation's most vulnerable citizens, including far too many veterans. Alexander Hamilton said the first duty of society is justice, and when you're talking about those who have sacrificed so much to protect us, that duty seems especially paramount. We owe our responsibility. We have a responsibility to give to them that have given so much to us. The moderator of today's panel knows well about all of these issues. He's been serving with such great distinction for the past 5 years. LSC's president, Jim Sandman. Jim's the former managing partner of Arnold & Porter, served as general counsel for the District of Columbia's public schools, was president of the D.C. Bar before joining LSC as its president. It's my pleasure to introduce our moderator, Jim Sandman.
Thank you, John. Good afternoon. Our panelists today are going to give us an overview of the legal needs of veterans and how legal aid programs can help to address those needs. I'm going to start by asking Will Gunn, a veteran, a lawyer, a former general counsel of the Department of Veterans Affairs, to set the stage for us, to describe something about the general legal needs of veterans and how legal aid programs can deal with them. I'll ask him to talk about the prevalence of legal issues facing veterans, the importance of them, the nature of them. We're then going to get more specific and hear from 2 legal aid programs that have specific veterans projects. We'll start with Susan Lutton from Mid-Missouri Legal Services, who will talk about a relationship that legal aid program has with a veterans VA hospital in Columbia, Missouri. And then I'll ask Maura Weber to talk about a veterans relief project that her program based in Kansas City runs for veterans. And then finally, we'll bring it down to the personal level. We'll hear from a veteran, from Ronnie, who has been the beneficiary of a number of legal services provided by Legal Aid of Western Missouri. So let's get started with Will. Will, you know a lot about this issue from a variety of perspectives. Can you give us the big picture about the legal needs of veterans? I think the range of those issues may come as a surprise to people.
Jim, I'll be happy to. Good afternoon, everyone. For the last several years, a major focus of the Department of Veterans Affairs has been on preventing and ending veterans' homelessness. And so one of the tools that VA uses to attack the problem is to measure what's going on with that population. And a measurement device that they use is something called the Challenge Survey. Challenge stands for Community Homelessness Assessment, Local Education, and Networking Groups. And so what happens is each year VA surveys not only veterans who are either homeless or at risk of being homeless. They also talk to community groups. They talk to VA employees who work with that population. And so on the VA website, you can find information about what that survey reveals. One of the things that has caught my interest, and that's directly related to our conversation here this afternoon, is the top 10 unmet needs of this population. When you look at that list is dominated by legal needs. To give you an example of what I'm talking about here, they have data, they have charts divided up between male veterans and female veterans. The chart for male veterans, and looking at the top 10 unmet needs, has 6 expressly legal needs on that list. These include the need for legal assistance to prevent eviction and foreclosure, legal assistance for child support issues, legal assistance to help restore a driver's license, legal assistance for outstanding warrants and fines, financial guardianship issues, as well as help with respect to upgrading discharges. If a veteran's discharge isn't upgraded, then oftentimes they're going to be prevented from being able to collect other types of VA benefits. And so if you look at the list, the top 10 unmet needs for women who are homeless, veterans, or at risk of being homeless, they're very similar. They are in slightly different places, but again, you're talking about legal assistance for child support, legal assistance to prevent eviction and foreclosure, legal assistance for outstanding warrants and fines, and financial guardianship. So again, on both lists, we're talking about 6 issues that are expressly legal related. And so that's a huge problem when there are very few resources out there for veterans to take advantage of to help meet those needs.
Could I follow up on that, Will, by asking you whether veterans identify those as legal needs? Do they self-identify those as legal problems, or do they just identify the problem and then the connection to legal is made by others?
Oftentimes, Jim, that's a great question. Oftentimes that connection is made by others. You take one of the things on both lists that surprised me, and that was the need for legal assistance to restore driver's licenses. And so that's a fascinating issue because it shows how one thing is connected to something else. Oftentimes, the driver's license issue comes up because, say, a child support issue. The veteran has an event, maybe loses a job, and so as a result of losing that job, they fall behind in child support. When they fall behind in child support, if they go in arrearage with respect to that, then the local authorities will suspend the veteran's driver's license. And there might be a warrant because they didn't meet a court date related to that. And so so one thing leads to another. And so the veteran may know, hey, I got a notice saying that my driver's license is suspended, but if I want to get to a job, then I need to drive anyway. And then, but if they get caught driving, then again, they're in trouble in the criminal justice system. So just having help from people that can say, hey, what you really need is some legal assistance to see if we can maybe go back to the root, adjust that child support obligation, and then let's focus some attention on getting your driver's license restored. And so unless a person is trained, they're not going to know necessarily the way that these issues are connected.
That's going to be a recurring theme in our presentations here, the importance of community partnerships, connecting people up, the people who are in a position to hear what the veterans' problems are, spot the legal issue, and then refer them to a legal aid organization who can assist them. Studies show that the single most important reason why Americans don't seek help for a civil legal problem is not cost. It's they don't identify the problem as a legal problem. So take, for example, the person who has significant debt issues, where there is a legal component. They may be able to discharge that debt. But if you ask them what kind of problem they have, they're going to say, I have a financial problem. They're not going to describe that as a legal problem. Or the person who has a problem with a suspended driver's license might say, I have a problem with the DMV. But they aren't going to think of that as a legal problem. So having people working in partnership who can connect the dots and can refer people to the right resources to solve their problem is a critical component of delivering legal services effectively. So, Will, can you describe some of the things that the Department of Veterans Affairs has done to help people whose needs show up on this list get connected to the people who can help them out? Does the VA provide legal services directly to them, or do you depend on others to do it?
Jim, the VA depends on others, community organizations, for instance, the Legal Services Corporation, among others, to provide those services. One of the things that I was proud of during my tenure at VA, we found that sometimes little things can make huge differences. And so we have provisions. If you go into a VA hospital, you will see offices for organizations such as the American Legion or Disabled American Veterans. And so when we started to focus and drill down on the homelessness issue, we said, well, why not partner with legal services organizations to come into VA hospitals? And so in asking the questions, it wasn't clear that we had the authority. But one of my colleagues, a gentleman by the name of Bill Russo, did some research, and we discovered, well, it's the same authority. And so we went forward, we issued a new directive making it clear to VA employees that they could partner with legal services organizations. After that, legal services organizations, law schools, bar associations started to come in and open free legal clinics in VA hospitals, and those have made a powerful difference. We've also partnered with law schools, and law schools increasingly have started up veterans clinics that focus on helping veterans with legal issues as well as helping them to obtain their benefits as well. So VA doesn't have the authority right now. However, there is a Senate bill, 425, that was part of an omnibus veterans package that is seeking to give the VA express authority to expend money on legal services. So that's encouraging.
Well, that's a great lead-in to the work that Susan's program does and the relationship that they have with the VA hospital in Columbia, Missouri. And one of the lessons from Will's presentation is that it's important to meet the veteran where the veteran is, wherever they're going for help, whatever door they happen to go through to seek assistance, to be sure that the people they're interacting with are able to identify a legal problem and refer them to legal resources. So, Susan, can you describe how you go about making that happen?
Sure. One of the places that we meet with veterans is the VA hospital in Columbia, which is just about a mile from our office. And we are referred people by the social workers at the VA hospital, by other community social agencies that also work in the VA hospital. And then often we meet with people who've called our office, and they meet us at the hospital on days when they're going to be there anyway. We work two days at the hospital, Tuesdays and Thursdays, and we chose those days because it's the days when a lot of outpatients come in for their medical clinic visits, so we get a lot of traffic in those days. And we see a broad smattering of people with all different kinds of legal problems who visit us. And we serve them in a lot of different areas.
Can you say more about the kinds of legal problems that veterans have? I think most people, when you mention veterans with legal problems, are immediately going to think of issues in accessing benefits that they've earned. What is the full range of legal issues that you see among the people coming through the VA hospital? And
we do have those who are seeking assistance in securing benefits, but we have a lot of others as well. We have people coming in who need orders of protection, reluctantly sometimes. Probably 2/3 of the violence victims that we talk with at the hospital are female, 1/3 are male, surprisingly, but I think that's because a lot of them are seeking child orders of protection for their own kids. So we help those people. We see a lot of people who have tremendous debt problems, debt that has wrongfully been assigned to them. You've probably heard of the zombie debt issues, debt that is already dead that legally should not be collected. We see people who have had they've had agreements with creditors and have paid through that agreement, paid off the debt already, usually a reduced amount, but then the creditors come back and sue them again in court. And we have vets who've had we have veterans who've had debts discharged in bankruptcy who actually are sued again on the very same debt. So we see a lot of people with consumer issues, And that's what usually leads to the homelessness that we see. They don't go to the hearings. They think, I've already paid this company for this debt. I don't have to go to this hearing. This must be an error. A default judgment is entered, and it comes straight out of their paycheck. And that's when the homelessness starts because they can't pay their rent.
How do you go about educating the social workers who work at the VA hospital to identify legal issues?
Well, the social workers at the hospital have meetings, and we do trainings with them periodically at the hospital. There are other social service agencies. We do the same thing within the community to make them aware of how interrelated these different legal issues are. Our veterans justice officers work hugely with criminal issues at our hospital, and we refer a lot of the people who have credit issues, or excuse me, criminal issues to them.
Which you don't handle.
We can't handle criminal issues. We have a lot of people who come in, veterans who have been summoned to court, and they have the very simple question because they know that they can ask us, and we can't divulge anything that they say, but they ask us if they should show up for their hearing. They don't want to show up for their hearing and express to us that they're not going to. And so we have a great relationship with the VJOs at the hospital, and we refer those people directly to them because that's when they get into real trouble, and that's when veterans make a very bad mistake in not showing up for court, because after that happens and there are warrants out for their arrest, their lives change dramatically.
And can you tell us something about the physical presence you have at the hospital and the volume of people you serve?
Okay, sure. We have an office. It's a small office, but the VA has a nice waiting area outside. We're in that hall, that corridor, where there are a lot of other agencies offering services as well. We have computers, printers, telephones so that we can be reached. We have psych professionals on standby who can help us if we need it. And we see, again, the referrals come primarily from social workers and the VJ officers who are there in the hospital. But we see in the space of a year, we'll serve anywhere from 50 to 100, maybe 150, depending on the year, in veterans in full-blown cases, but the number of people that we talk to is probably 5 times that number. We have a lot of what we call other services, and that's those people who come in who are over-income, but they have tremendous problems, and we give them guidance, and we have to be careful not to give them advice, and that's why we keep our most experienced attorney in that office. But we can't give legal advice, but we can give information. We can make very meaningful referrals because there are some other agencies in town, in our area, that do provide legal services in very specific, narrow areas like veterans benefits. And if they serve people whether they're at 125% of the federal poverty level or above. And so we can make referrals to those places. But a lot of what we do is provide printouts of explanations of the process that they have to go through to resolve their legal problems. And we do it from the stateside legal website, that a beautiful website created by Pine Tree in the state of Maine, where I'm from, and then we have a great wealth of information on our statewide website as well in the state of Missouri. So anybody can access that information, whether you're poor or whether you have more money. That same law applies to you. So we provide printouts of those different sections of the law that they can look to, and referral information about social service agencies that can help them.
Thanks for the plug for statesidelegal.org. Write this down, statesidelegal, all one word, .org. This is a national website that was developed with assistance from LSC funding by Pine Tree Legal Assistance in Maine. It is the go-to online resource for veterans and military families in dealing with their legal needs. I know at least one senator, Senator Angus King of Maine, has a link to it on his website under the Constituent Services tab. And I'd encourage others to do it. It's a very useful resource for veterans and military families who may not know where else to go, and it assembles a whole body of law. It's very user-friendly, written in plain language, easy for people to understand. One final question for you. You used the term over-income.
Yes.
And can you say a little bit more about what the income eligibility requirement is for people being served by a legal aid program that LSC funds?
Right. Our program serves people up to 125% of the federal poverty level. We can, with other funding, serve people up to 200%. So basically, we have to do a screening of people when they come into our offices to check whether or not they are, quotes, income eligible, and also whether they have any conflicts with any of our current clients to whom we owe a duty of confidentiality.
I'll put some numbers on that. 125% of the federal poverty guideline. This year, for an individual, 125% of the federal poverty guideline is an income of $14,850. For a family of four, it's $30,375. If you make more than that, you are ineligible for service at a legal aid program using LSC funds. As you might imagine, there are a lot of people who make more than those numbers who still can't possibly afford a lawyer. And that's why these referral services that Susan mentioned are so critically important. Of the people that you see, and I'm talking not just about the number that you mentioned you provide full service to, the people that you see coming through the hospital, how many meet that income eligibility standard and how many are over it? Do you have an estimate?
I think probably 20% meet our eligibility standard.
But the others, you don't just say, sorry, we can't help.
No.
You do what you can to try to steer them. And what kinds of places can you refer them to for help?
The Missouri Bar has a phenomenal pro bono program, and they actually go around the state with volunteer lawyers and have clinics, generally on Fridays, sometimes on Saturdays, but they meet at the VA hospital. It's coordinated by the VJOs at each hospital, and they talk to people of any income level. And a lot of the cases that they handle are criminal cases. A lot of them are restoration of driver's licenses, expungements. They help people get criminal convictions expunged. Another wonderful resource, we live in the town where the University of Missouri sits, and we're fortunate to have about 14 to 16 law students in-house every semester, but they also have a project at the University of Missouri Law School, which does nothing but disability benefits. And then, of course, we have a roster of pro bono attorneys who are willing to take anybody. They just want to be on the list from our local bar association, which, by the way, pays for us to be at the hospital. We use LSC funding for the cases that we do for people who are within our income guidelines. But because we do give a lot of referrals and so forth, we use Boone County Bar Association funding to pay for our time that we actually spend at the hospital.
Well, this is a great example of a first-rate legal aid program that is deeply integrated in its community, that has relationships with other service providers dealing with the same population that they're trying to serve, but also has relationships with the bar associations, with law schools, with individual lawyers who can provide pro bono assistance when they're not able to help a person who's over income. So let's turn to Maura. Maura has headed a program at Legal Aid of Western Missouri, a Veterans Relief Project, they call it. Could you tell us how that project came to be set up, what the need was that you were trying to address, and how it works?
So there's a national grant called the Supportive Services for Veterans Families Grant that's intended to help homeless veterans obtain and maintain stable housing. So my project started with a few partner agencies who received that grant wanting us to address the legal needs of veterans that are getting in the way of stable housing. And from there, we started meeting with the VA and realized there's just as much legal need with people who may not be homeless but are very low income. So we built this into a project of one. I was doing the outreach and the legal representation for the SSVF grant and the VA referrals.
So how did you do your outreach? How did you get started?
So the VA, we started with the VJOs, and the Kansas City VA has some wonderful VJOs. They have office hours every Monday, and anyone who's having a problem, they might not even know it's a legal problem. They come into the VJOs.
Can you explain the acronym for people
sorry.
who might not be familiar with it?
Veterans Justice Outreach Coordinators. They do Veterans Court, if anyone's familiar with Veterans Court, trying to help people with mental health veterans with mental health issues kind of circumvent jail. That's maybe not the best option for them. I meet with them our VJOs pretty regularly. They can call me with a question if this is a legal issue. They can email me, kind of constant training and partnership, working with them to make sure we're getting the veterans from the VA the best possible legal services.
So your outreach goes well beyond just veterans hospitals?
Yes, and so the Supportive Services for Veterans grant grantees who we partner with, they let me come on site and I do what's called a full legal assessment. So I have a list of questions of every possible legal issue that legal aid is able to handle. So obviously not criminal, not fee generating, and I just go through every topic, and if that's a legal problem that they say they're having, then I'll get more in depth and see if either I can represent them or if our volunteer attorney project can represent them. And in 2015, of the people who had legal needs assessments, 89% had civil legal aid eligible legal needs, and 21% had more than one.
And were they income eligible?
Yes, but to be part of the SSVF program, they're going to be pretty low income, so that I don't have that problem quite as much as Susan does.
And can you give some examples of the range of legal issues that you identify through these interviews?
Yeah. Debt is a problem a lot. We do Chapter 7 bankruptcies, domestic violence issues, divorce, order of protection, child support modifications come up a lot, either old incomes being used, arrears. We see a lot of Social Security disability, supplemental security income, landlord tenants, foreclosure, people just needing something as simple as food stamps to be able to eat.
Do you do all the outreach yourself, or do you have others who are doing similar assessments to identify legal needs?
I do the majority of it myself, unless I ask at one day for one of our paralegals' help. But I do it most all myself, and I do all the cases myself.
Can you give some examples of your referral sources, other agencies that you deal with that direct veterans to you that may not have found their way to you otherwise?
Salvation Army, a local agency called Restart Incorporated, and Catholic Charities are the three that refer directly to me, other than the VA. A few judges will call me, and of course I do whatever I can for the judges. But.
And what have you done to educate those partners about the services that you can provide and how to identify legal problems? They all have regular monthly meetings, and I'll contact them and go out and meet with their social workers just to kind of remind them what legal problems legal aid is able to assist with. And again, I give them all my direct contact information, so because it's better, I think, to be as accessible as possible so that every legal problem can come to me. Mm-hmm. And can you give us some idea of the volume of work that you have?
My project has, on average, 200 referrals a year, but we have so many more veterans than that come in through the front door who aren't referred to us. That's just the veterans who have made it to the VJOs, who have made it to the SSVF grantees who get referred to me.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So I'd now like to turn to Ronnie and hear from a person who has had experience with the legal aid program, a veteran. Thank you for your service.
Thank you.
If you could tell us something about how you came to Legal Aid of Western Missouri, what the circumstances were that brought you there, and what your experience was with them.
I was an amputee, and my wife abandoned me and left me homeless. Took everything, including my dog and my pickup, which is a no-no for a Texas boy. I was scared. I was homeless. I had very little money coming in. And I don't want to sound like a country song or any of that. I just want to tell you that without Mara, I probably wouldn't be here today. Because at one point in my life, after I lost my leg, I wanted to take my life. Because at one point in time in my life, I had $1 billion worth of equipment under my control. Anywhere from 30 to 200 men at any given time, including officers that I was responsible for and trained, and went to this, and this is low for me. It makes me feel bad in here, knowing that I still want to defend this country and this flag. That's my life. Without Mara, without Laura Wonderland, there's so many people I could thank for the rest of my life. I know that some of you don't think this is important to us old veterans, but it is, because in Vietnam, we didn't come back to a hero's welcome. We come back to have Jane Fonda spit in our face, or people tell us we were baby killers, and we're nothing like that. I have a statement that I was supposed to be reading from, and I'm ad-libbing, and I'm sorry.
That's all right.
But anyway, I was living in rural Missouri with my wife of 21 years when I had my leg amputated in August of 2014. I came out of the surgery and found out that my wife had left me, moved in with another man, abandoned me, and left me homeless. After healing, I moved into a homeless shelter ran by the Red Cross. That was when I was given the opportunity to talk with Mara and Laura Wonderland at Restart. And my life had been turned upside down totally. My wife got a power of attorney by lying to me, emptied my bank account of my little $1,000 a month, which doesn't even pay for the things I need paid for, and left me even further in debt. Mara, I cannot praise her enough. If there's any one person in this world that is fantastic, it's her. But they helped me to terminate that power of attorney and protect my income. They also helped me get a divorce from that wife in an uncontested settlement. As a part of a divorce agreement, I was not left with any of my ex-wife's debts. Third, legal aid helped me with my student loan debt, and I was able to get approval from the Department of Education to discharge the debt on the basis of my disability. And finally, legal aid is helping me with a bankruptcy, something that I desperately need. I have medical and other debts from the past that I really am not liable to pay. A lot of them were brought about by my wife, ex-wife. I only receive Social Security disability income, which is just barely over $1,000 a month. And dissolving those debts will give me peace of mind. There is a young lady named Chrissy that works with Mara, who is a friend of Mara's, at Legal Aid of Western Missouri. And thanks to this beautiful woman, I now have another best friend, which is my dog Lexi, who helps me greatly when I get anxious. And she's never questions me and never has a problem with me. She's always loving me. And I'm eternally grateful to the legal aid system for helping me. I am eternally grateful for the important services that all veterans need, because there are many veterans out there that need services. I see veterans every day living on the corners or in the woods, and they don't need a handout. They need a hand up. They need help to get into the legal aid system, to get into Restart or whatever program is in that state, and help them get out of homelessness and to feel better about themselves. Not so much the new veterans coming out, but they have problems too. But the old veterans really have problems, and nobody understands the problems of those old veterans like myself. And I honestly have to say, all veterans are veterans. They never stop serving, ever. And there isn't a veteran, whether they've seen combat or not, that does not have PTSD. And that is a very serious thing that everybody needs to look at, is PTSD, because it affects here and here.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing your story, and thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Could you say a little bit more about how you got connected to legal aid? You said the Red Cross made the connection?
I was living at the Red Cross there in Kansas City, Kansas. They have a homeless shelter, and I was in that homeless shelter, and I was talking to my counselor, and my counselor says, well, what legal problems do you have? And I said, I don't know. She says, okay, I think we need to contact you with legal aid. And that's when I met this wonderful woman. She is such a fantastic person. And from there, I got my legal services. But there's a lot of them that do not know they qualify for legal services. A lot of people still living on the streets. And like I said, we don't need to give them money. We need to give them help.
Thank you, Maura, for what you did. To hear a story like that from a client, this is someone who had a good experience with the legal system, a good experience with a lawyer. Legal aid lawyers as a group are the lowest paid lawyers in the legal profession. The average starting salary for a first-year lawyer at a legal aid program that LSC funds is $43,000 a year. Legal aid lawyers carry crushing caseloads. They deal with the emotional burden of their clients' circumstances. They have to deal with the heartbreak of turning lots of people away they would like to help but can't. And they deal with financial instability, always wondering what next year's funding is going to be like and whether there will be enough to support them. But they bring a passion to their work that you see here in the way that they talk about it. And it results in client stories like this one. I think they're the heroes of the legal profession and not appreciated for what they do. I'd like to thank you. We'd be happy to take questions from any of you. Yes?
Hi, Jared Jones, Senator Capito, veteran and recovering corporate attorney.
Thank you for your service.
Thank you. So West Virginia had one of the first Equal Justice AmeriCorps, Equal Justice Works AmeriCorps Legal Fellows, if I remember getting that correctly, and was the first to kind of crack the code about, for lack of a better word, VA hospitals allowing access as vendors, technically, to come into the hospitals, and we had the first law school come into partnership with VA. I wanted to ask about the funding model for the LSC veterans attorneys, the Equal Justice Works AmeriCorps. I believe that ours was 50% Equal Justice Works AmeriCorps, 50% from the state level LSC. But I don't know if that funding model was the same around the country or different circumstances, or what to say that funding model was currently.
Susan, have you used that program?
No, we have not.
My impression is that it varies, that the way it's structured can depend on the particular sponsor of the program, what other funding sources they have. I think some of them are funded entirely by the volunteer program and not supplemented with LSC funding. But this is a critical source of additional people for legal aid programs where they can work with Equal Justice Works to identify a candidate and funding to support the fellowship. Many of the fellows that Equal Justice Works funds are doing veterans work.
So it's a hodgepodge.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Karen.
Just to clarify about that program, Equal Justice Works, for folks who aren't familiar with them, is a national nonprofit that applied to the Corporation for National Community Service to run an AmeriCorps program that serves veterans. So it's federally funded. About half of the funding, or maybe a little less, comes from the Corporation for National Community Service, and Equal Justice Works and the host legal aid program have to raise the rest of the money, private funding. But it's also it's not a federal program. It's thanks to Equal Justice Works having applied to run it. So it's a time-limited grant that they receive. So it's not an ongoing, sustained program. But they would love it to be.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Ronnie, thank you for your service, and Warren, Susan, thank you for what you do. I too am a veteran, 25 years, veteran here, working with Senator Brown as a veterans fellow. My question is for you, actually, during my transition from, I agree with Ronnie, I agree that veterans now are classified different. You have your earlier veterans and you have your post 9/11 veterans. My question is, how can we better get your services, what you do, how you help veterans out to the service members before they get in a situation where you can't help them, i.e. the transition services, ACAP, TAP, partnering with DOD. Is there any way we can help do a better job of bringing those services to the soldiers that really need it? Because most of those post 9/11 don't utilize VA as much as the older veterans. A lot of those service members choose not to use VA, go to TRICARE. So they never may see it VA. They never may come in contact with the VA.
Well, I think there are a couple of things that can be done. One of the things was, during my tenure at VA, legislation was passed that made TAP, the Transition Assistance Program, mandatory for military members to go through. So now, anytime a military member leaves the military for whatever reason, they are entitled to, and the military has to provide some transition assistance planning. And those programs now, part of them includes orientation on what VA benefits are you entitled to. And as I'm sure you know, one of the most generous aspects of that is the post 9/11 GI Bill, which a lot of veterans are taking advantage of. I see you have your Army pin on. A friend of mine went to the Transition Assistance Program for the different services, and he found in the Marines, for instance, the Marines did it in such a way that if you went through Transition Assistance Program for the Marines, then they had, one of the requirements was that you started your disability compensation package there in the room before you ever left. And so what happens is veterans, I'm a 25-year veteran. I never applied for VA benefits until years after I left the military. But if a veteran has, say, a medical problem, if their situation has decreased at all, physically or mentally, from the time that they enter the military, then they may be entitled to some type of disability compensation. And so the problem is, if you do it right away, it's a lot easier to show service connection as opposed to doing it. You know, we still have Vietnam era veterans that come in, had never taken advantage of the program, and now they're trying to access those services, but it's years after they've left the service, and it's very difficult for them to prove that the ailment that they're dealing with now can be traced back to their military service. So we have to use programs such as Transition Assistance Program, or TAP. We also have to make sure that we're working with different organizations. One of the themes that I've heard here today that I'm encouraged by is, say, Ronnie, for instance, was staying with the Red Cross, and he was referred to legal services. And so that's a great thing that's going on. Former chairman of the Joint Chiefs, Admiral Mullen, he used to say it like this: we're enjoying a time where there's just a sea of goodwill for veterans. The problem is you can drown in a sea of goodwill if people aren't working together. And so, you know, as people are thinking about, there's still people that are interested in starting up new nonprofits. I don't think there's really a great need for that, but where there is a need is coordination amongst those programs and work making sure that the different programs that are already out there know what each other are doing, and that can be of tremendous help.
Great. Yes.
Ryan Maurer, Senator Donnelly's office, veteran myself as well, continuing the trend. Continuing the trend as well, question maybe for Susan. Missouri, you know, I work for a senator from Indiana. Missouri, very similar state, urban, rural. Can you talk through a bit of the challenges with LSC and kind of getting that penetration amongst kind of the rural community, especially in places where you're not going to have that VA hospital where there's a, you know, the legal clinic co-located?
Sure. And just so that you know, Missouri is a big state. I mean, I think it's even larger than Indiana. But the area that we serve, the hospital area that we serve, literally extends from the top of Missouri at the border of Iowa all the way down to the bottom of Missouri to Arkansas. It says it's an area of 44 counties. And so obviously our 10 lawyers at Legal Aid can't go to court in that huge area. But Missouri, like every other state in the country, the LSC-funded legal aid programs cover every single county. There's not a county that we don't cover. We cover every place. And so what, again, when people come in and we have to make referrals, if you will, people may be income eligible for our services, but we still have to partner with our sister programs to get the veterans in those very distant counties taken care of and have an attorney from one of the other legal aid programs represent them in their local county. It's just not efficient or affordable for us to be all over the state. And so we handle it that way. And probably a fifth of the people that we talk to, we send to our sister programs.
The issue you raise is a problem across the country, delivering legal services in rural areas that are sparsely populated and very far from legal aid offices. One thing that LSC has done for 16 years now is to fund technology grants. And a number of our programs have used technology grants to try to make their services more accessible to people through video conferencing. They may have an outlet that they set up in a public library. They may have a lawyer on a Saturday morning in a public library serving people. They connect with pro bono lawyers in different parts of the state who may be serving clients at some distance from where the lawyer's office is, using technology, including video connections. So there's progress being made there, but I don't think anybody could claim today that there isn't an advantage to being physically proximate to a legal aid office as opposed to being far away from one. Susan, you told me about something earlier. I'm thinking of the question about veterans as they're exiting the system, about some services that you provide to people who are entering the military and who don't yet qualify for JAG assistance, but they have legal needs.
Right. And that's one of the advantages to Stateside Legal, the website that we've been referring to. There's an entire section that has downloadable forms. You can actually fill them out and print them. And they are for a wide variety of benefits, but one area is for people who have been called to active duty, and the public doesn't know what the legal requirements are for landlords, employers, credit card companies. They're not aware of what their responsibilities are in helping these veterans get into active duty. And you do have the right to have your lease terminated. You simply have to prepare the appropriate letter, which is online at Stateside Legal, and attach your active duty orders to that, and the same with your employer. So it's a very good tool. That site has forms that are just tremendous, and we actually have used that quite a bit. I don't think the landlords are necessarily bad people. They just see somebody who's trying to get out of their lease early, and they're not aware of what the legal requirements are. And you're allowed to get your security deposit back on an expedited basis within 30 days if you've been called to active duty, and that's federal requirement. And so those letters are all online for them to use.
Okay, thank you. Yes?
Last question. So do you partner with Fort Leonard Wood to push clients who not qualify for your services back to the installation legal services?
Fort Leonard Wood is in the southern part of the state, and so it's in the area of another one of our legal aid programs. But again, when we have somebody who needs legal services and they're outside of our service area, we just refer them to the other legal aid program if they're within the ballpark of qualifying for services. Yeah.
I'd like to thank all of our panelists for coming here today to share their stories with us. These are wonderful presentations. Please join me in thanking them.